Okay, so welcome to the third last webinar in our big webinar series. This one is the technical side of putting it all together. Before we begin, I'll introduce myself. I recognize everyone here today, but if people are watching down the road, I'm Navara. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm currently the project manager for LEMDO. I'm also the person who does many of the final checks on edition and anthology pages. So when we're getting ready for publication, I will look at your file, or Janelle will look at your file, but I do that for many of our anthologies. I'm also currently knitting a sweater, which I don't have right in front of me, but I'm very excited about it, and have been working on it in all of my meetings and waiting rooms and stuff lately. So if that's you too, and you want to be crafting, moving around, sketching, taking notes, please feel free to do that. It's not a problem at all.
It's a very
But
beautiful sweater. I've had the opportunity to see it being made during meetings.
thank you. Um, I'll also start us off with a territorial acknowledgement. We acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen, Songhees, and Kosapsum or Esquimalt peoples on whose territory the university stands, and the Lekwungen and Wasanich peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. So today we're going to really be talking about how those just final pieces of your edition slip together so that we can have a beautiful landing page and people can navigate it online. So we're going to talk about kind of the technical side of how LEMDO's handshake model works. That's how your files get included in the edition and excuse me, and the edition kind of just all fits together. We're also going to talk about what goes into your edition page metadata. Throughout this webinar series, we've kind of skirted around metadata a little bit, talked about a piece or two. Today, we're going to really get into it. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll be comfortable encoding and updating your own edition landing page. Sorry for the cough, uh, just lingering from cold I had earlier in the year, so hopefully it won't interrupt too much. So first, let's talk about the handshake model. So this is including files in your edition. Now, how LEMDO includes files in your edition, so your, annotation file is in your edition, people can look at it online. We have to do that in two places. The first is in a file's TEI header, you need to say this is going into DRE anthology or QME or MOMS or whatever anthology you're working with. And then in your edition landing page, you have to say, yes, I want this file to be included. So it happens in two places. If it's not in both places, the file doesn't get published. And that also helps to make sure if you are publishing in two phases, first you're putting out, your semi-diplomatic text, your textual notes, everything like that. And then later on, you're publishing your full edition. It makes sure that those in-progress files don't get published. So kind of protects you that way. So in your file, that first step is in the TEI header, you will have a publication statement. And we'll talk about kind of the order of elements in your TEI header in a little bit. Don't panic too much. Right now, I just want to point out that in your file, you will have a publication statement. And in there, you will have an availability element. Then you will have probably at least two license elements. One of them is going to license for whatever anthology you're in. So DRE, MOMS, NISE, DUE, whatever it is. And then the next one will license it for LEMDO as a whole. Both of them will have whatever date your edition is being published. And then you will give your own purse XML ID here. So if it were my edition, I would put purse colon HOUL3 because that's my XML ID. If it was Janelle's edition, she would put JENS1 because that's her XML ID. And that's just how you're able to include it and give that copyright. In your edition page, this is how you're going to include your files. So each file that you add is going to go in the note statement. This is also in your TEI header. You'll have a note statement, and it will have a list of related items. Each file that you want to publish and you want to have on your edition landing page, it must have a related item element, and it will just have a target. It's the same linking mechanism we've been talking about for a few months. You're going to have that target attribute, and then always begin with the doc colon prefix because you're linking to a document, and then whatever that file's name is. And so here, we've got modern text, annotation, collation, gen intro. If you have a semi-diplomatic transcription, that will also get a related item. If you have acknowledgements, that also gets a related item. So everything that you want published needs to go in here in your edition file. Okay, are there any questions about that kind of handshake model, the two places that you need to include things? Nope. Perfect. So moving on to the edition page itself. The edition page, that's what we call it when we're working in the TI. You might also think of it as your landing page on whatever website you'll be published on. When people go to your edition, this is the first place that they will be. So these will link to your files. The pages that you want people to go to, this is how they navigate to it. So you'll link to them from here. And they do allow for nice and easy navigation. And they're going to be formatted slightly differently depending on your anthology. So if you're working on DRE, this is what it will look like. You'll have your title at the top, author, editor, and then you'll have a whole div for your quick start, which is typically just your modern text. DRE has a whole div for it because they have some texts that have multiple files that they want to link to for their quick starts, and it's easier this way. And then, your text, your critical pair text, and your apparatus files. We usually include your apparatus, so a standalone annotation and collation page, because when you are proofreading or it's going through peer review, it's a lot easier to just check everything over that way. If you're working on Due, this is what it looks like, fairly similar, but you'll see we have a few extra divs. That's fine. QME is the one that is a bit different from the others because you'll notice instead of just having a list, we have kind of a table going on here. If you're working on a QME edition, when we set up your edition page, we will try to set it up just like this so that you don't have to worry about formatting yourself. So typically the LEMDO team will set up your edition page and then you will edit it and make sure that everything's correct. So if it's a QME play, we'll just set it up like this. And then moms, this is what your edition pages will look like. So slightly different, but there's certainly a theme there. You don't need to be panicking, oh, I need to learn something completely new for my anthology specifically. They all follow more or less the same encoding. So the first exciting thing, I think this is probably the most exciting thing about the edition page, is the TEI header. Everyone's favorite, metadata. This is where you get to give credit, license your edition, talk about the anthology that you're part of, talk about any sources and stuff that you've used. It's a pretty exciting place. This is the basic outline of the file description. So your TEI header, the first child element in there will be the file desk. And it has a few different elements inside. We'll talk about each of them one by one. But this is the order that they go in. So first you'll have the title statement. That's where your title, all of your responsibility statements, your funders, everything like that goes inside title statement. Edition statement just says what anthology and version number your edition was released with. A publication statement where you give that licensing information. Series statement where you say, I'm part of DRE or I'm part of MOMS. Um, the note statement, which is where you give that list of files that you're including. And then your source desk where you say, I edited this edition. So when we're looking at that title statement, this is a very brief one. The first thing you're going to have is your title. You'll typically have two, a main one and a short one, although I suspect we will be phasing out the short title. It doesn't actually show up on metadata panes anymore. You'll give typically more than one RESP statement. I think there's, in an edition page, there's typically a minimum of four. Because you need to give yourself credit, you need to give copyright, and you will typically give a credit to the LEMDO team for encoding work. You'll give your sponsor, and then however many funders that you have. So when we're looking at the title statement part of that, we're going bit by bit into these TI headers. The title statement, again, you have two. You have your main one. That's just whatever your play is called or your edition is called. So Love's Labor's Lost or Pericles, whatever you want it to be called. And then your edition abbreviation is that DRE play ID that you get. LLL or FV for Famous Victories or H5 for Henry V. So whatever that is, that's what goes into your edition abbreviation. After your titles, you're going to give the responsibility statements, or the RESP statements is how I usually call them. Your anthology will have a list that you're required to give. You can also give additional ones if you've had RAs who have been really involved that you need to give a credit to, but your anthology will have essentially a list that you need to give. But generally speaking, you will need at least a credit for the editor, that's you, a credit for your anthology leads, and then two copyright holder ones, one for the editorial content and one for the XML and interface. XML and interface is typically for University of Victoria. And then an acknowledgement of the LEMDO team, because the LEMDO team has probably either converted your edition from the IML or has helped to encode it or has checked the encoding. People from the LEMDO team have worked on your files at some point. And you will format them like this. They get a RESP statement element, and then everyone requires two things. The first is a RESP element, which has a ref, prefix RESP colon, and then an XML ID with the role in the text node. So for example, if you're giving yourself a credit as an editor, RESP colon EDT for editor, and then this would say editor, and then down here you need your name. If you're giving credit to a person, you'll use the person name element. If you're giving credit to an organization such as the LEMDO team, University of Victoria, anything like that, you'll use the org name element. Generally, you will have examples of both of these just as soon as we make your file. Most of the metadata stuff is kind of taken care of when it's created, but you will want to check it, make sure that the people who need credit are given credit. But the person name is encoded as it usually is with that ref attribute, pers colon, and then whatever your XML ID is, and then your name in the text node. For these RESP values here, we have quite a few options. I've kind of pared it down to the ones that you might possibly use in your edition page. There are more that you'll use elsewhere, such as author. But you've got options for editor, contributing editor, supervising editor, coordinating editor, general editor, EDT_MRK, that's for if you've had somebody encode. That's if LEMDO has converted your edition. That's for your markup editors. EDT_perf, especially for QME folks, that's your performance editor. And then EDT_text is your textual editor. If you have RAs, you've got options for editorial research assistant or research team member. And then if your edition has been peer reviewed and the peer reviewer's name is being shared, they can also get that ref statement with the value of that. CPH is what we use for the copyright holder. So you'll have two of those, one for yourself, one for University of Victoria.
Can I jump in?
Yes, please.
To give credit where credit is due, most of these come from the Library of Congress taxonomy of responsibilities to make us maximally interoperable with other metadata.
Thank you, Janelle. Okay. So once you've gone through and you've added all of your RESP statements, the next thing that's going to be in your title statement is your sponsor. That's the anthology that you're being published with. So if you are QME, you can put org:QME1. If you're DRE, org:QME1, and then however many funders you have. Now, Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada has given LEMDO funding, so that's in there. But if you have other funders, Friends of the ISE, your university, anything like that, each of them will get their own funder element. And here are the anthology XML IDs. They'll also have a lowercase option, but these are the ones that are typically put into that sponsor element. Okay, so that's the title statement. Lots of information goes in there. It's yeah, an information-rich element. But once you're done that, the next thing in your file desk is going to be your edition statement. And this one is always going to follow the same format, so it's pretty straightforward. You'll have a child P, and then you will say released with whatever your anthology name is, and then whatever version number. So if you're being published in the upcoming DRE release, it'll be released with Digital Renaissance Editions 2.0. If you were released in the previous MOMS release, released with Moemel Mayoral Shows 1.0, and so on. And we do check. So if your edition statement doesn't follow this exact format, we will get a diagnostic error before we release. So everything will follow the same format on this. We will notice if it accidentally is slightly different. Once you've done that, you then get to license your edition. And this is that same publication statement again. So in your edition page, you will also have the publication statement. It will have a child publisher element. This is the University of Victoria on the linked Early Modern Drama online platform. That should be in there once your file's created. But you should double check your license elements that they've got a date in there. That will probably be updated as we're getting ready for release. But you do want to make sure that your XML ID is in both of the RESPs. So that's really the thing to check here is the RESP attribute. And then check that those CRESPs have the anthologies that you're being published with. Your anthology will have a copyright statement of some sort, so that will go in this paragraph here. After your publication statement comes the series statement. This is just, again, reiterating which anthology you're part of. So Moemel Mayoral Shows, New Internet Shakespeare editions, whatever it is, that will go in your series statement. Then you have that note statement that we looked at earlier, and I've just put a little sample one up here. This is your format. So you'll have a related item element. Note that it's self-closing, so it's got that slash at the end of the element. It will have a target attribute, and then again, that same linking mechanism. So doc colon, whatever the file name is. You don't need .xml or anything like that, just the name itself. Afterwards, you have your source description or your source desk. Again, your anthology will have a format you can follow, but you might need to modify it a bit. So that's when chat with your anthology leads about if you're uncertain. The example from DRE, this is without any of the markup. So LEMDO team would be tagged. The names of all of the coordinating editors would be tagged. But without that, Born Digital Edition landing page created by the LEMDO team and curated by DRE co-coordinating editors, Janelle Genstad and Brett Greatley Hirsch. And so that's talking about this file, how was this created? And then about the edition, it was first published in DRE 1.0 anthology on the ISE platform. It's been converted to TEI XML and remediated by the LEMDO team for republication in the DRE 2.0 anthology on the LEMDO platform. So this is giving information about where this file has come from. And that's the goal of the source desk, is it should tell where is this file coming from. Afterwards, you have your profile description. And if you've heard us talk about this before, you've probably just heard us say your cat refs. Many files have more than one cat ref. Your edition page is probably just going to have the one. And it will have cat LDT born dig edition. So it says this file is an edition page. Your encoding description, again, this is pretty well just anthology level decision. All of our LEMDO files will have this in a paragraph in the encoding desk, encoded into EIP5 according to the LEMDO customization and encoding guidelines. Your edition page is a little bit unique in that it also has a project desk element in here. And this is a blurb from your anthology talking about the anthology. We'll also have an editorial decal, or editorial declaration, and it essentially will say what editorial guidelines you used while you were editing. So this edition was edited according to the DRE editorial guidelines, ISE editorial guidelines, whatever it is. May include additional information such as if you followed Canadian or US American spelling. But again, your anthology will kind of give you the format that you need to follow. And
Can I
that's
jump in, Navarra?
Please.
Yep, the previous slide and the one before that, it's just a copy paste. That should be a closing profile desk, and then on the next slide, a closing
Oh, yes.
encoding desk. Just for those of you who might be watching later.
Yeah. Okay, so that's your TEI header. Now we can talk about the actual body of your edition page. So this is what people see when they go online. This is a encoding that corresponds with what they see online. So here's the first thing, is there are a few different formats. So we looked at those different landing pages earlier. There are kind of three potential formats that I'll point out. The first one is you're following a list, and you've got a quick start in its own div. So this is like that DRE one that we saw. First, you're going to have some byline elements, probably two of them, potentially more, depending on the number of editors that you have working on your edition. So you'll have an author, and then you'll give their XML ID in a first name element, and then you'll have your editor, and this is where you put your XML ID and then your name. After that, you'll have a div. That div will have the head quick start. That's the quick start div. Remember that each div is a section in your file, and each head is the section heading. It'll have your list. It will just have one item. It might have one more if you are giving more than one modern text in your quick start. Um, but this one just has one. It'll have a ref element that links using that target attribute, same as we always see with those ref elements. So the ref element target attribute, doc colon, and then the file's XML ID. You'll give the play title and then in parentheses say modern, assuming that the modernized text is in your quick start. I think the only case where that's not true is for the Dewey anthology. Um, but for most other things, your modernized text is going to be what people want to see first. Then you'll give a second div. This one is for the text of your edition. It will give your modernized text again, and then it will give your semi-diplomatic text or semi-diplomatic texts, plural. And for those, you'll give your play title. Is it Quarto 1, Quarto 2, first folio? You'll give the year that it was published, and then in parentheses, semi-diplomatic transcription. If you are working on QME, however, you will still say old spelling text, but other anthologies, semi-diplomatic transcription. You'll have a div for your critical paratext, again with that list. Each file should be in an item element with that ref, and then just give the title of the file, general intro, bibliography, role list. And then finally a div for your apparatus files. So you've got your list with your annotations and your collation. If you have a quick start that's not in its own div, so if you're working on moms, for example, follows this format, you'll still give your two bylines. That's the exact same. Your quick start now, instead of being in a div, will just be in a paragraph, a P element. We'll say quick start colon, and then we'll give that same ref as usual. After that, you'll have your divs, exact same divs as before, text of this edition, critical paratext, apparatus. Nothing has changed other than that quick start is now in a P. Yes, I see a question.
Sorry, you might have said this and I might have just not processed it. Why would the quick start be in its own div or not in its own div?
That's mostly an anthology decision.
Okay.
DRE is doing it in its own div because some plays, like for example, the Honest Tour has two different texts that are part of the same edition. So it has Honest Tour Part 1, Honest Tour Part 2. Both of them need to be in the quick start. And rather than saying quick start, each in their own paragraph, we can just put a div and then have a list. But if you only have one text that is in the quick start, it can go in a P.
Okay. So if I'm doing a mayoral show, it's going to be not in its own div.
Exactly, yeah,
Okay.
it'll be in the P like this.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. All right, and then if you're a QME person, this is your format. So we're following a table format now rather than that list. Again, we're going to start with our two bylines, exact same. You might have more if you have a performance editor. They will also get a byline here. You will then, instead of saying quick start, say integrated edition. That's just the vocabulary that QME is following. So it's what I've put in this table format. And then you'll have, doesn't actually need a div. There's a div in here, but it doesn't need that div. It could just be a table, I think. And then you'll have your table. The table itself we'll set up for you when we create the edition landing page. But you'll want to make sure that everything is how you want it to be. The QME edition landing pages, they have two columns in their table. Two-column TOC is the type. It's a two-column table of contents. And so in our first row, we're going to have two columns. The first one is going to be the introduction to the playtext, and that will be your general introduction, bibliography, anything like that. Then you'll have your introduction to the production. That will be your performance intro that you've written. So your doc, EMD, whatever your play abbreviation is, perf intro. And then you'll have two things that come from QME, not from your edition. So the QME Shakespeare and Queen's Men Productions, and then the performance bibliography. And those should be the same in all of your QME files. You'll then have your next row with, again, two columns, so two cell elements. The first will be your play text that has your modernized text and your old spelling transcription. And then the second one will have your performances. So if you have performance videos and production credits, that's where those go. Are there any questions here? No? Okay. I was going to share my screen for a second just so that you can see how this all goes together in an actual file. So hopefully the text is big enough for people to kind of see. Yeah. Okay. My oxygen is a different color than yours is, almost certainly. I just find these colors a little bit easier to see than the gray background or the white background. So first, of course, we have our TEI header, and it has that file desk. And we can see it in this outline view here. You can also always see at the top of the file kind of the pathway to get whatever element you're in. So here we're at the file desk. We can see that its parent is a TEI header, and the parent of TEI header is TEI. And that's going to be the same in every file you're in. When you're clicked in an element, it will tell you the pathway to get there. So we have our file desk. Its first child, as we talked about, is going to be the title statement. Two titles, the main one, this is the play's title, A Humorous Day's Mirth, and then the short title, which is AHDM. There is a typo here. Janelle, I'm going to change that now. There we go. AHDM, not ADHM. This is perfect that we get to fix that. Then we have REST statements. This is a DRE play. It's getting ready to be released soon. And so it's been updated with the information it needs. The first thing is a RESP statement for the editor. We've got that RESP:EDT for editor, and then LELO is the person there. Then we have a RESP statement for each of the co-coordinating editors. Brett Greatley-Hirsch, Janelle Genstad, James Murdoch, Sarah Neville. And that XML ID is EDT_COORD. After that, we have our two copyright holder RESP statements that we talked about. So the first one for the editorial content, that goes to Eleanor Lowe, who's the editor of this edition. And then a copyright holder for XML and interface, which goes to the University of Victoria. Finally, we have a RESP statement for the conversion and remediation of this edition, and that was done by the LEMDO team. So those are the RESP statements, and the editions in this anthology will all have essentially the same ones. Some of them might have more if there have been contributing editors. We have our sponsor. That's our self-closing element right here with the ref of org DRE1. So that says, let me include this in the DRE anthology, please. And then the DRE anthology will include it from their end. It's the same deal, another handshake model there. We have a list of funders. This one has three. It has SSHRC, it has the University of Western Australia, and it has Friends of the ISE. So each of those are given a credit for helping to fund this edition. Now we're done the title statement. So we've gone from our files up here, TI header, file desk, title statement, funder. We're out of title statement now into edition statement. This is still inside of the file desk though. And it has, again, that same format, released with Digital Renaissance Editions 2.0. We have our publication statement, which gives, as always, the publisher. And then here are the two licenses, one for DRE, one for LEMDO. It gives intellectual copyright to LELO, and then says that this file is Creative Commons 4.0 license. It also says that credit should be given, and this is not available for ingestion into LLMs. We have our series statement, that's just the anthology name, Digital Renaissance Editions. And then here's our note statement. This one has quite a few related items. It's got the modernized text, first quarto, an acknowledgements file, general intro, and so on. Each of them is given a related item. And then we have that source desk. And this follows that same format as before. Born Digital landing page, created by LEMDO, curated by Janelle and Brett. First published on ISE, it's been remediated to publish on the new platform. Once we're done with that, we're out of the file desk. And we move into that profile desk, which just contains the class ref and the cat ref. Then we're at the encoding description. It says that it's encoded in CEIP5, as all of your files will say, according to the LEMDO customization and encoding guidelines. It has a project desk. This was following a format given by the DRE. So this edition was prepared by Eleanor Lowe for the Digital Renaissance Editions anthology on the LEMDO platform. Fairly simple one. Finally, we have the editorial decal, and that's that one that says which editorial guidelines this edition was edited according to. And it also says that it uses Canadian English spelling. Now, after that, we have the revision desk, which I didn't include in my slides, but I will mention here really quickly. The revision desk is in all of your files. I think we mentioned this all the way back last, maybe the second ever webinar, is that we have a revision desk in all of the files. And this revision desk does a few things. The first thing it does is it gives the status of the file. So, you begin off, the file is in progress, so TEI_INP for in progress. If your file began life as an IML file, it will say IML-TEI_INP. And then as it moves through into the proofing stage, it will change to _proofing. Once it's been proofed, it changes to _proofed. It has one final change that will be just published, and that will happen when this file is published. And so that's one of the last things that happens before we publish an anthology is we go through all of the files and update those statuses. And here we've got the change statement that's ready for us to publish the file, so we can just uncomment it and say, good to go, we've published. After that is all of the major changes that have happened to this file, including a record of every time that the status has changed. So when you work on a file, I always say, add a change statement when you begin work on a file, when you finish work on a file, and then whenever you do something you're particularly proud of. So when you start work on a file, you go in, you add a change element to say, hey, I started remediating this file or encoding this file or adding files to the note statement so that they're included in the edition. The edition page, there's not a ton that you need to say, I'm really proud of this step, but when you're proofing something or you finish proofing something, you would put one in. And then whenever you change the status, so when you start proofing, like Janelle did here, you'd put a status TEI proofing because that gives a record. Even though the status up here will change over time, it will eventually be published. We will always have a record that Janelle started proofing this file 2024-06-03.
Jump in.
Please do.
Yeah. To give credit where credit is due, this is a protocol that Martin Holmes dreamed up for MOEML because one of the problems with digital projects is that it's not always clear when something was actually published. And so if we use the change element, we have a date and a status, and we can pinpoint exactly when the page was published, and that date can be displayed on the bottom of the page. So that makes it more likely that people will cite our work because they can see that it's got the same kinds of publication protocols and information that a printed book would have. And so they feel more confident citing it.
Yeah. Yeah. So adding those change statements is important. The other thing you'll notice is that in your files, if I go in or one of the LEMDO team goes in and does something, we will add a change statement. Just then you have that record of what somebody else has done in your edition. So when I go in and I fix, you know, you have an error in your file and you're like, Navarra, please help. I'll go in and I'll leave a change statement to say what I did in there. So then you have that record for yourself as well. And then we're done our revision desk. We're out of the TEI header. Here's our text. We're in the body part of the text, which you'll always have. Here are those first two byline elements, author and editor. This is a DRE file, so it begins off with that div for the quick start. Just the one item in that list. That's fine. You can have a list with one item, not a problem. Then we have the div with text of this edition. And two items in this list, we've got the modernized text and the semi-diplomatic transcription. One thing that if you've got a really keen eye this morning, that you might notice that's different between this file and, say, a general critical paratext that also uses divs, is this div doesn't have any attributes on it. It doesn't have an XML ID. You could add one. It's not required. We typically don't, because these pages are pretty easy to navigate just on the screen. And people are unlikely to want to cite your table of contents, which is the use of the XML ID. It's people can link to it, cite it. That's generally not happening with your table of contents. We have a div for the critical paratexts. It also has a list. This one's longer. Acknowledgements, gen intro, a note on the lottery, stage history, everything like that goes into your critical paratext div. And then finally a div for the apparatus text. So here we have our annotations and we have our collation. Is everybody kind of understanding the format? Perfect. In that case, we will do a quick recap. So the things that we talked about today, first we talked about licensing your files and editions, remembering that for a file to be included in your edition, the file needs to have a license element, and then the edition landing page needs to have a related item element linking back to the file. So it's that handshake model. It happens in two places if you want your file to be included. For metadata, that TEI header, your anthology will have format for lots of it, and they'll have a metadata template to follow, especially as we're getting close to releases. And so you can chat with your anthology leads about what needs to go in there. I also will mention that LEMDO team will check the metadata before publication. It's just one of the steps that we take, is going through and making sure that the metadata is all following formats, clear, everything's there that needs to be there. For the body of your landing page, remember that every anthology has minor variations, but that generally their encoding is very similar. You will have at least two byline elements. You might have more if you have multiple editors working on your text, or if there are multiple authors working on your text. You'll have a quick start that links to at least one of your texts, typically a modernized one. And this is how your readers are navigating your edition. So if you want it in there, make sure that it's in your edition page. We have a few resources that are useful. The first one is the Introduction to Editions and Anthologies. This gives a bit of a deeper dive into how that handshake model works, how you include things. The responsibilities taxonomy, if you remember that table that I had with the list of values for the RESP statements, we have all of them listed out in the responsibilities taxonomy page. It has way more than what I showed you today, but the ones I showed you today are what you'll use for your edition page. We have a file on how to encode edition pages. And then we have a metadata template, but I will give you the fair note that every anthology is going to be a bit different. I'll also like to say thank you to the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada for funding this webinar series. It has been fantastic, and I hope you'll come for the last two webinars next month. Thanks to me for slide design. Thank you to Martin and Janelle for TEI customization, and to the UVics Humanities Computing and Media Center for site design and hosting. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Navarra.
And I'll check, are there any other questions lingering?
I have a couple of questions, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
of course.
So I think my first question is about the responsibility statement.
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking at slide 21, and I think the responsibility statement is a child of title statement. Is that correct?
Yes.
On slide 21. But then on slide 28, at the bottom of that slide, is that supposed to be
Oh,
closing the
that should be
title?
title statement. That's an error.
Okay.
Yeah. Every
So
now and then
sponsor.
when I'm doing my PowerPoints, I miss the closing tag, updating the closing tag.
Oh no, that's totally fine. I just wanted to make sure that sponsor and funder were not child elements of the
No,
responsibility.
no, they're not.
Okay. Um, I think that was my question. My other question is, can you share your theme for Oxygen? Because it's so beautiful and I hate the dark theme and I
Thank
hate the
you.
light theme.
So, it is a trial and error every time for me getting it running. I'll pull it up again. This is a helpful thing to know in general. You can change how your oxygen looks if you go up to options and then preferences.
So
Uh,
have you just changed like
I've
individual?
changed one by one to get it to look that way. In
Okay.
appearance and then colors, this takes care of most of the background.
Okay. I think you could like package this and sell it because it's
Thank
so
you.
beautiful.
Thank you. That's very kind. To change the element and text color, I think that's in editor somewhere. It always takes me a while to find, but it should be somewhere under editor. If you go through all the options, it will eventually show you the colors. Um,
Okay.
and then you can play around with it until you have something that you like.
Okay. Because like I said, I don't like the light. And so then I switch back to the graphite and then I don't like it either.
Yeah, I know. I was finding that they're both, neither of them is quite what I prefer. So, but
Okay.
yeah,
So you've just changed it like one by one with
yeah,
like, okay.
yeah,
All right. Thanks.
yeah, no
Yeah.
problem.
While we're on the subject of responsibility statements, LEMDO is a bit out of step with many other TEI projects. It's more conventional for people to put RESP statements inside the edition statement. But Moeml put the RESP statements inside the title statement in 2008. And LEMDO just followed suit without thinking too hard about it. But as I've been helping other projects design their own TEI schema, I've tended to recommend that people put the RESP statement in the edition statement. Just want to make sure everybody is aware that when you look at other TEI projects, things can be different.
Mhm.
There's no one right or wrong way to do these things, provided you're compliant with the TEI all schema.
Thank you, Navarra. Thank you,
No worries.
Janelle.
Okay, thank you all for coming. Assuming no more questions, we'll call it a day and I'll stop the recording.